I am a lifelong Diablo fan. I was playing Diablo 2 and Diablo 2 LOD when I was 13 years old, and I'm now nearly 33. It is my all-time favourite game series, and that doesn't even come close. The most watched video on my channel is a top 15 PC games from the early 2000s. Can you guess what I put as number one? It's Diablo 2 LOD. I am obsessed with the genre. I paid a ridiculous amount of money to get into the beta this weekend so I could try out Diablo 4 and see what it was like. I came into Diablo 3 with high expectations. There was nothing made since Diablo 2. The hype for Diablo 3 was off the charts. I actually think the hype for Diablo 4 is somewhat tempered because Diablo 3 was somewhat of a disappointment. But I tell you what, I'm very happy I played the beta this weekend because Diablo 4, by all accounts, is a good game. I'm enjoying it so far. I have time to watch all of this video. I'm going to give you a very brief overview in the next minute or so. If you do want to watch this video, timestamps in the description below. You can jump between different sections in there and you can sort of think and hear me talk about certain parts of the game that you find interesting. Ultimately, here's my 1 minute review. Diablo 4 is really quite good. It's a weird mix between Diablo Immortal, a little bit of Path of Exile, a little bit of Lost Ark, and then quite a decent amount borrowed back from Diablo 3. The only real Diablo 2 feel you're going to get is very familiar skills and kind of the dark grittiness of this game. It is as good as an offering in an ARPG genre as you're going to get on the market right now. And I think Blizzard have done a very strong job with this. There are definitely things that could be improved. There's definitely a lot to be said about the later game that which you haven't had the chance to experience yet. But if you were expecting to be disappointed by Diablo 4, you probably won't be. That's not to say that some of you might be disappointed by Diablo 4. Some of you will be. But if you were expecting to be disappointed like I was, you came in with kind of like the low expectations of Diablo 3 not living up to what you wanted it to be, then Diablo 4 surpasses those expectations by quite a bit. It's a good game. Now let's jump into the specifics as to why I think that. Let's start with the combat then. This is what sort of pleasantly surprised me with Diablo 4. It has got a very healthy mix of different styles of ARPG combat. You can almost certainly sort of fulfill your classic ARPG style of just running through huge groups of mobs, one-shotting them with an ability. I mean, Frozen Orb is an ability in this game, so you can kind of like hark back to that very classic Diablo Frozen Orb sorceress. But there is this very, very cool kind of like end of dungeon boss fights, and this reminds me more of like of Lost Ark fights, which is why I mentioned Lost Ark in the intro. There's a lot of movement mechanics in these fights. They are hard. Now I'm playing on the highest difficulty available to me in the beta, so I'm expecting these boss fights to probably be a bit easier if you play the easier difficulties, but I wouldn't recommend playing the easier difficulties if you want to, because these kind of challenging boss fights were really interesting. You had to very, very clearly have a strategy for some of them, especially if you didn't have all of the skills that you needed unlocked. Like the boss that I'm doing here, I'm almost certain you weren't supposed to do at the level that I was trying to do him. But regardless, it definitely felt like a really challenging combat system that had the good mix of just clearing out the crap mobs all the time. And that was a really nice feeling in Diablo. I think one of the criticisms that I would have is that monster density sometimes felt very irregular. There would be areas where you just felt absolutely overwhelmed with monsters and you found it very difficult to kind of burn through them. And there'll be areas where there was like one or two mobs and they would just, that would be it. You'd have to like waste a couple of spells just to kill them. So yeah, monster density definitely felt a little odd, especially in the open world environment. It's a bit better in dungeons, a bit more consistent. But overall, I was very, very pleasantly surprised with the combat in Diablo. It felt much better than Diablo 3. It felt quite fluid, but also challenging. And that's what is quite nice, you know? It's not just a face roll, and it didn't feel like a grind, you know? Like, I think sometimes, even when I was playing Diablo 2 Resurrected, I forgot how much of a grind combat felt at the very start of the game. Even from the get-go in Diablo 4, combat felt really nice and fluid, and that was a really positive thing for me. So combat definitely gets a big tick. So items. For those of you that have played Diablo Immortal and Diablo 3, the item system will feel identical. it definitely isn't like Diablo 2. Every item occupies the same sort of space in your inventory, so inventory management is not as sort of in line with Diablo 2, and therefore I don't think that things like charms are going to become a thing unless they have said otherwise. And it is essentially Diablo Immortal, the item system. Now, I think the item system in Diablo Immortal was okay. What I did like was the extraction system, where you could extract a unique ability from a unique item, usually any sort of an ability that amplified one of your skills. So I think that was a good thing, and I actually quite liked that about Diablo Immortal. But you know, I don't think there are going to be rune words in this game, and I do think that this item system may find yourself going down that sort of, it has to be a set that you have to work towards, or there are just going to be certain unique items that are just the best in slot for your type of build. That might not be as much of an issue when I talk about skills, but in Diablo 3, usually what you found was that there was one build that revolved around a single unique item that you had to find, otherwise you weren't going to be competitive, and that felt kind of shitty. So that's just something that I have a reservation about with Diablo 4's item system. The rules, you know, there isn't like an extensive crafting system in Diablo, not like you can do with PoE. Like, I personally think that Path of Exile's item system is one of the best in ARPGs out there. There is just so much you can do in terms of customization and building those items that it gives a lot of end game potential, you know, to kind of how you play the game. Whereas this feels like you could just be searching for a certain unique, and that's kind of what you have to aim for. Items are kind of mid for me in Diablo 4. I have to see how the end game shapes out really to give you a solid opinion, but it's Diablo 3, Diablo Immortal essentially. Now, skills. Skills were really interesting to me. Probably one of my favorite parts about Diablo 4 so far. There's a lot of like sort of fan service to Diablo 2 enjoyers with a lot of old school skills, especially with Sorceress. You're going to get access to things like Blizzard. There's stuff like Frozen Orb, Chain Lightning, lots of really cool stuff in there that a lot of old school Diablo players are going to enjoy. The other thing I like about it is that it's not Diablo 3 skills. Diablo 3 skills were awful, and that entire system completely removed any uniqueness to any character, because you could just swap out whatever skills you wanted whenever you wanted, which was just not very fun. Now, you can respec quite easily in Diablo 4, so it's not like you have to keep remaking characters over and over again like you did in Diablo 2, which was obviously before they introduced the respec tokens. But each tier allows you to be a bit creative with your skill set. So you can be a full lightning sorceress like I am here, but you can mix and match elemental skills. There are sort of builds that allow you to benefit from mix and matching elemental skills. And I think it's probably very similar across all of the classes. There's a lot of freedom of choice. There's a lot of different types of build paths you can take. There are passive abilities in there. There's a whole kind of like mini Path of Exile skill tree, essentially. I think that they found a happy medium between Diablo 3, turbo boosted, awful skills, and Path of Exile, which is, you know, almost PhD level required to really understand the whole thing. So I think they've got a nice medium between the two. And I think if you are a Path of Exile enjoyer, you might enjoy the Diablo skill tree for what it is. And if you're a Diablo 2 fan, you'll probably enjoy it because of the types of skills that are available to you. And you'll feel very nostalgic playing through those types of skills. And if you're a Diablo 3 fan, it still is simple enough that you can kind of get to grips with it relatively quickly. So I think the skills they've done a really good job with the skills here. There is some meaningful choice to building your character. You can make your character feel unique. You can give your character an identity through its skill set. And that, to me, is a really positive thing. So I think, in general, Diablo 4 has done a really good job with the skills. I haven't played through all the characters. I don't know the full level of customization available. But yeah, I think they've done a really good job with the skills, to be honest with you. Exploration. I thought I'd do a little bit about exploration because it's also something that I have experienced through playing the game. There is a decent amount to explore in Diablo 4. And what I mean by that is when, you know, you look at the map, you look at the little nooks and crannies, those areas of the map that lead to nowhere. In most Diablo games, you ain't going to find much. It'll usually be a dead end and maybe a chest or something like that. But in Diablo 4, you have these like vantage points. You have these things called Lilith statues, which give you a permanent boost. There are secrets, there are dungeons. There is quite a lot of exploration that can happen in Diablo 4, which I really like. So I think like it's giving you more to find, and I think they've been inspired slightly by Lost Ark here. Lost Ark went overboard on stuff that you could find on the map, but Diablo 4 is at least giving you a reason to want to explore beyond the main questline paths. And that's good because, you know, I'm a big explorer. I'm the kind of person that likes to find every single and light up every single part of the map to sort of see what's going on. So there's something to explore in most of these little corners of the map. Maybe one of the downsides is that it's very Diablo Immortal-like on the map. Everything feels kind of boxed in. You know, I guess I was sold this idea that Diablo 4 was going to be a bit more open world, I suppose. And, you know, when I had this envision of open world, I really had this envision of, like, big open landscapes. Like, a bit like Diablo 2, where you aren't really boxed into pathways, but there's just, like, these big squares that you have the ability to explore. The maps are very Diablo 2-like. And so... Sorry, Diablo Immortal-like. So, they are... And Diablo 3, I guess, and most ARPGs to an extent, they are very boxed in. So the open world part of Diablo 4 doesn't feel quite there for me yet. Maybe it'll feel a little different down the line. I haven't played the later stages of the game, but overall, you know, there is a reason to explore through some of the levels, you know, beyond that sort of main beaten path, which is good. And I think that was lacking in things like Diablo 3 and Diablo Immortal. Wanted to do a little talk on dungeons. There are quite a decent amount of these like side areas on the map in Diablo 4, of which you can repeat, and you can do them over and over again. They remind me very much of the side areas in Diablo 2. I imagine they might be areas that you can look to farm gear later in the game. Obviously, I haven't got that far yet, so I'm just making sort of a speculative guess. But they feel pretty good, and I think they're quite challenging as well. Like a lot of these dungeons have like this end boss at the end of it, very similar to sort of the stuff you saw at the start of the game in combat. Some of them don't. Some of them are merely just small packs of monsters that you need to kill. But there is a lot of things to explore in terms of dungeons and side quests, and I know that there is a lot of hype about sort of the later stages of the game as well. One of the small things that kind of irked me is that outside of dungeons in these areas that you're seeing right here, it's very Diablo Immortal-like. Like once you've cleared an area, that's not cleared. You go into a dungeon and you come back out again, and you're in a different instance, and those monsters have respawned. So what I have found is that traversing the map, especially going in and out of dungeons, can be a little tedious, primarily because a lot of the monsters that you can't really be bothered to kill over and over again do respawn all the time, and that can get a bit annoying. It's a very small thing, and I suppose once you get to the point where you can literally one-shot these mobs, it won't be as much of an issue, but it definitely felt a little annoying for me coming in and out of a dungeon. Like, I just step into a dungeon, decide I don't want to do it, and come back out again, and suddenly I've got to clear the entire 50 camp worth of monsters that I just cleared to get there. It irks me a little bit, but not too bad, you know. Now, I didn't want to go really down the rabbit hole with everything about Diablo 4. Like, ultimately, I only played this game for around 25 hours this weekend, and it was a small, closed beta. However, I am hopeful for the game. I think it looks pretty good. If the end game has got a lot of replayability value to it, if they can kind of channel some of that late-stage World of Warcraft energy, I think this game has got some real legs. You know, I'm definitely looking at it through rose-tinted spectacles. I'm a big Diablo fan. Even with Diablo 3, which I was disappointed by, I still had fun playing through it and have logged many, many hours in the game. But, you know, my genuine opinion is this game feels good. This game looks good and it feels good. There is a lot of fan service. Combat feels strong. Skills feel good. I have some reservations about the item system. I have some reservations about the potential battle pass system. I'm really hoping there's no kind of pay to win elements with this. The crafting system leaves a little bit to be desired. There's a lot of there's kind of this gathering system where you like gather herbs and things, but the only thing that I can figure out that you can use it for at the moment is kind of upgrading your potion, and then obviously like upgrading gear to an extent. So, you know, I think there is some things that I'm not so totally sold on, but the very core elements of the game I do really like. And I think, Diablo 4 has definitely got legs, and I'm very excited to give it a go when it finally releases. I'm going to play the next beta as well, maybe play a different character and see how that goes. I chose not to play too much into the game, mostly because I didn't want to spoil the game for me. The story seems pretty cool. That's another thing. The story seems relatively good in this game as well. But, there are still things that I need to really see the full extent of to get a great opinion. But overall, initial impressions are really good. So if you're wondering whether you should bother spending the money, probably don't pre-order it. But pending more reviews and more looks into the game, it's looking like a really solid Diablo buy. And that's all I could have really hoped for, given kind of how disappointing Diablo 3 was. Anyway, that's everything. Thank you guys for watching if you did, and I'll see you soon.